Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final series of SBIR STTR proposal. In today's discussion, Eva Garland Consulting will touch upon commercialization plans. Today's webinar is brought to you by University Lab Partners in partnership with Eva Garland Consulting. My name is Teresa Fry. I'm the events coordinator at University Lab Partners. And as we get started, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to ULP.
Hi, I'm Karen Cook, Executive Director at University Lab Partners. University Lab Partners really serves three critical roles here in Orange County. First and foremost, we support life science innovators and entrepreneurs by providing wet lab space and critical infrastructure. Second, we serve as a landing ground for life science innovation. We provide networking and educational opportunities so life science innovators really have a place to call home. But most importantly, University Lab Partners serves as a catalyst in this region for workforce development activities in the life science space here. We truly believe as our companies are creating great jobs, we need to serve as an active agent to develop that talent pipeline for this sector.
What makes our hands-on laboratory experiences unique is the fact that they are led by our life science innovators that are actually here working within our space. These instructors bring their real-world experience and applications into the classroom as the students are using industry-standard techniques and equipment.
With our expansion here in the Orange County community, we look to serve more innovators and students all across Orange County.
University Lab Partners is a nonprofit premier wet lab media tech incubator located at UCI Research Park in Irvine, California. We provide researchers with over 22,000 square feet of scientific resources, contributing to the acceleration of innovation in Orange County. And our benefits encompass flexible lab space, office space, state-of-the-art scientific equipment. We have over $3 million worth of that, and access to UCI's technical core resources. And we provide extensive support for our commercialization endeavors through a wide array of resources and activities. So we have events that are like OC Life, our Lunch and Learns, as like you are attending today. And then lastly, don't forget to connect with us on our various platforms that you see here. We're always appreciative of hearing from you. And I wanted to give you a little housekeeping today before we begin. Everyone is muted during the webinar. There'll be a Q&A at the end of the presentation, but feel free to ask questions during the webinar by writing them in the chat box. We may not get to everyone's questions, but we will do our best. And most importantly, the recorded presentation and this the presentation that Dr. Turner will provide will be followed up in an email. So today's webinar is presented by Brandon Turner, our Dr. Brandon Turner, our grant writing specialist with Eva Garland Consulting. Dr. Turner provides a broad range of scientific expertise, ranging from neurophysiology to adult behavior, to molecular biology and genetics. He's an experienced manuscript editor and science writer, and he has many awards included in National Institutes of Health training grant at Vanderbilt University and a postdoctorate through the NIH Brain Initiative at Duke University. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Turner. I'll turn the presentation to you and I'll stop sharing. There you go.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Give me 1 second to share my screen. I hope everyone can see that. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to part 4 of our SBIR and STTR series. Thank you for being here with us today. As Teresa mentioned, we're going to focus today on commercialization plans. A little bit more background before we get started on us at EGC. Here at EGC, our mission is advancing science. We assist scientists and entrepreneurs in obtaining and managing grant funding. We have a team of over 50 plus PhD level scientific consultants and grant accounting experts. And we have clients all across the continental US. Over 2,500 different companies, universities, incubators, government agencies, and small businesses. As Teresa mentioned, I myself am a scientific consultant and grant writing specialist here at EGC. I have a PhD in neuroscience from Vanderbilt University, and I did my postdoctoral fellowship at Duke University here in North Carolina. My expertise is in biotechnology, pharmaceutical sciences, and diagnostic assays. I've worked with my clients to perform assessments of their technology, help scope out product development, prepare proposals, perform gap analyses in their team and company, as well as with strategic planning for non-dilutive funding acquisition. And I've written proposals for multiple different agencies. Relevant today, I've worked on SBIR and STTR and other non-dilutive funding through the NIH and NSF, as well as others such as the DoD and Economic Development Administration. So today we're going to talk about commercialization plans. And we want to talk on a few high-level points first. That is how we differentiate the commercialization plan from your research strategy, as some of the aspects that go into a commercialization plan are also reflected there. We'll talk a little about the specifics that go into a commercialization plan, including the market need and customer pain points, the value proposition and your business plan, your product development timeline and milestones, and the importance of knowing your competition. So to start, let's look at the application as a whole and why the comp plan is different from a research strategy. First, I'm going to back up and remind everyone of the general components of a grant application. We're focusing here on the NIH and NSF, since they both have commercialization plans as part of their phase 2 applications. In general, grant applications consist of a one-page summary, specific aims or technical objectives detailing the unmet need, innovation of your project, and planned activities in the proposal. This is accompanied by your research strategy for the NIH or project description for the NSF, as well as a budget and budget justification and numerous supporting documents. These can include a commercialization plan as a standalone document, depending upon what phase of the application you are at, that is phase 1 versus phase 2 SBIR, STTR for these two agencies, or depending upon the solicitation. With that in mind, I want to remind all of you the importance of reading the announcement. This is something Dr. Upton touched on last week, and I myself and Dr. Heaney touched on in the first few weeks. Always read the announcement before you get started. There may occasionally be agency-specific or announcement-specific requirements, particularly related to commercialization plans. And the two agencies we're talking about today, NIH and NSF, the announcement provides details on what they're looking for in a commercialization plan, and also specific sections you should consider addressing when filling out your comp plan. The commercialization plan itself differs on the extent of information required for phase 1 and phase 2. For a National Science Foundation, a separate commercial plan is not required for phase 1. This is instead a set of information included within the 15-page project narrative that you submit as part of your proposal. However, within that, there are two sections where you're given the opportunity to address the market and commercial need. First is very explicitly labeled the commercial opportunity, but the NSF recommends you take 2 to 4 pages to describe your market drivers, your customer, their pain points, intellectual property, some basics of your business model, and commercialization approach. You'll also describe your company and team, which the NSF recommends allocating 1 to 3 pages for, where you'll discuss your key team members, the vision for the company, if you've had any prior revenue or funding history, and how the current proposal aligns with ongoing company objectives or other competing objectives that you're currently undertaking. This is to make it very clear that the NSF has a large focus on commercialization, even at phase 1. Transitioning to phase 2, these same concepts are now encompassed within a standalone 15-page commercialization plan. For the NSF, putting high emphasis on commercialization, significant details are needed for a strong comp plan and to be successful in phase 2, and this is a major score driver for reviewers and critical to the success of the grant. Looking at the sections in a NSF commercialization plan in a bit more detail, they can be broken down into 4 broad areas. That is the market opportunity, company and team, product technology and competition, and finance and revenue model. For the market opportunity, the goal here is to summarize the unmet need that your technology is addressing, how this product will address it directly, and highlight how your business model will support product development. For the company and team, here's your opportunity to highlight the group of experts that you have assembled to not only do the project that you're outlining in the research strategy, but also ensure the success of your company and overall product down the line that is beyond the phase 1 or phase 2 SBIR support that you are applying for. Your product technology and competition section is where you'll establish your product's commercial relevance, its innovation, and advantages over current standards. And finally, your finance and revenue model is where you outline your strategy to fund future development, again, beyond SBIR or STTR support, leading towards commercialization of the product. Additionally, this is where you can explain how your company will profit from the commercialization of your product. Switching gears to the National Institute of Health, much like the NSF, for phase 1, a separate commercialization plan is not required. However, commercialization does factor into several of the score criteria at the NIH, even in phase 1 proposals. So while not required as a separate document, it is important to highlight various parts of the commercial potential of your product within your application, particularly your customer, end user, and how your business is built around the development of this product. For phase 2 or fast track applications, much like the NSF, the commercialization plan is now a standalone document. For the NIH, commercialization plan is reviewed and scored within the significance review criteria. However, it should be noted that the NIH does not put as much emphasis on the details of this plan, and reviewers may not spend as much time discussing it. However, a sound, well-reasoned, and well-presented plan is necessary for a solid application, with the goal of the commercialization plan being to highlight the commercial potential of technology and indicate that you've thought about your path to market and the key risks that you need to address in getting there. Much like the NSF, several of the sections required for an NIH comp plan are overlapping, but are broken down into a little bit more granular detail. The first is the value of the project or expected outcomes and impact. This is an opportunity for you to provide a high-level overview of the relevance of your technology to human health and to society in general. In the NSF, this sort of section or review criteria is viewed as part of broader impacts. Additionally, you can also describe your company, much like you described it for the NSF proposal, highlighting the business and regulatory support you have beyond the key scientific personnel needed to perform the project. You'll also describe the market, customer, and competition, denote your intellectual property, that is current status and plans to protect future IP, your finance plan, production and marketing plan, and revenue stream. Now, some of the key points in the commercialization plan, such as the broad objectives of your project and technology, may overlap a bit with your research strategy. Recall on your research strategy, the significance section should be where you identify the specific problem that your product is going to solve. And you also have a section to denote your innovation or technical objectives, where you should talk a lot about the product and why it's beneficial or advantageous over current standards. The main place we can differentiate the comp plan from the research strategy is with respect to tone, references, messaging, the company and team, your objectives, and graphics. So first, for tone, I'm going to recommend that the commercialization plan should sound as if it was written by a CEO, while the research plan should be more technical. Here we want to avoid jargon and condense difficult concepts or granular details into high-level overview so that someone who's not familiar with the specifics of the field you're working in can still understand your objectives and why it's important. To do this, you can cite review articles and market reports rather than trying to cite primary literature that's specific to your technology. You don't need to cite entirely independent articles from your research strategy. Certain things will definitely overlap between the two, and those references will be identical. However, here you want to focus more on broad impact, and you can use review articles and market reports to highlight that. Additionally, messaging. In the research strategy, the goal is to convey that you have the resources, the team, and the plan required to successfully execute the project. For the commercialization plan, your goal is to convey you have those same resources available to you that will ensure the success of your business and product rather than the project alone. That is, the comp plan should extend beyond just the phase 1 or phase 2 proposal and explain to reviewers what your next steps are or what your other activities are as a company that are going to ensure the product can make it to market beyond the grant support. You can specifically highlight members of your company and team such as business advisors, regulatory consultants, marketing professionals, potential major company milestones or competitions, pitch competitions that you've won in the past, other investments or letters or interest from other agencies here that help indicate that likelihood of survival beyond the grant support. You can still note the scientific prowess on your team. However, the focus should be on the business rather than the project. Similarly, objectives and timeline. Again, these should extend beyond the efforts outlined in the proposal. What are your next steps after the SBIR STTR grant ends? How will the grant enable you to get there? How does it fit into your overall development plan? And then finally, graphics. Figures and tables are useful for both the research strategy and commercialization plan. But unlike the research strategy, where graphics tend to be very focused on the molecular or cellular pathways that your product is engaging or mechanisms of action, in the commercialization plan, they should read more like a brochure or a marketing pamphlet, talking about things like market size, customer pain points. How is this going to address an issue that the end user is experiencing? How are they going to pay for it? What benefits does it convey to them? And I'd like to provide a couple examples of how this tone and messaging changes between the research strategy and commercialization plan. There's a few examples from some funded applications, which you can find on the NIA's website. This is from a company known as Amprion. And here on the left, you can see an excerpt from the research strategy. This is in the significance section. And they're developing a technology for Alzheimer's disease diagnosis. They go on to describe the specific problems in Alzheimer's disease diagnosis. Particularly, there's a lack of widely accepted early sensitive objective laboratory diagnosis, and then go on to explain how the current standard of care is insufficient, highlighting specific molecular and cellular markers that are screened for, how these are interpreted, and specific challenges and difficulties in interpreting these results. These two broad concepts are essentially condensed into 3 sentences in the commercialization plan, where they explain that the current diagnosis of AD is primarily performed using cognitive tests, CSF analysis, and that the challenges of these is that patients will have to exhibit substantial defects at the cellular level long before cognitive measures or current use biomarkers start to indicate pathology. So again, we're taking a lot of the jargon and specific highly targeted references and condensing them into broad points so that someone not intimately familiar with how Alzheimer's disease diagnosis is performed at a cellular, molecular, or even behavioral level can interpret the importance of your project and realize its potential. This is a second example, this time focusing on messaging and objectives. And here's an excerpt from the same application describing the innovation and a value proposition in the commercialization plan. On the left, the authors are explaining the particular goals of their project, the advantages of their particular type of diagnostic, and how this protein-based PCR-like technology will be a highly innovative aspect, and what specifically their platform is detecting and why this is beneficial. On the right, these broad concepts are again condensed into 3 short sentences: that their technology detects critical molecular pathogenic events. We believe our technology offers the best opportunity to develop a diagnostic test for this space, and the purpose of this grant is to generate data to further support this. So again, taking those broad objectives, condensing them into concrete goals for someone who's not familiar with the specific technology area. Here's another example of how you can use graphics and differentiate the research strategy from the commercialization plan by focusing more on the end user rather than the specifics of how the technology functions. This is a sample from a different application, Care Coach, also through the National Institute of Aging. On the left, their innovation section highlights a graphic of specifically showing how their technology works. What details does it measure? What data does it output? But on the right, they're not focusing on what specifically it does, but how it impacts care. They're showing their Care Coach avatar in between Family Portal, Health Advocates, Clinical Algorithms, and Provider Portal, and conveying specific benefits to the end users, as decreased falls, delirium, and increased value-based care and self-management. Here, they're focusing more on the end user rather than the specifics of the technology. So a few general tips on differentiating your research strategy. First is to focus on outcomes rather than technical details. As you can see from the examples on the prior slides, we really want to condense all of the granular technical details into short sentences that really convey those high-level points to someone who might not be familiar with that area, and avoid jargon. This is a space you can cite market reports and any user or customer feedback that you may have garnered on your own or can find available online elsewhere, rather than trying to cite primary literature directly related to the technology itself. This is a space for you to highlight the company's long-term goals. Again, think beyond SBIR and STTR support. Spotlighting your business advisors and investors is a great way to indicate the potential for success of your product and company, and can also help support long-term goals, even if you haven't fully fleshed them out yet. This is also a space for you to point to relative competitors in your field and why they have succeeded as well as why they have failed. Companies working in your space that have gotten to market, they indicate that it's possible for you to do so as well. And companies that have failed indicate a potential for innovation, for you to capitalize on something that they couldn't do. And using these to highlight the competitive advantages of your technology. So next we want to dive into the market needs and customer pain points. Before I jump in there, I do want to note that the following couple sections are applicable to both NIH and NSF commercialization plans. Since the maybe suggested order of the commercialization plan sections for NIH and NSF do not perfectly align, these sections are condensed based on similarity of content, not necessarily where they would fit in your commercialization plan. But moving on to the market need and customer pain points. The key things we want to address here are first, market size, growth, and barriers to entry. This is a space for you to provide information on the overall market to give an idea of its size, both globally and potentially within the United States, its projected growth, any drivers and constraints, and barriers to entry specifically for small businesses such as yours. These factors can include noting whether the market is crowded, are there a lot of other key players in the space, a lot of new innovation, is it very resistant to change? Perhaps something where the gold standard is heavily rooted in current practice. Is it slow growing or newly formed? And what sort of challenges do these present for you, and how might you overcome them? Next, we also want to address customer needs. Again, we want to highlight the customer pain point here that your product or service will address. This is similar to the significance statement that you'll include in your research strategy or project description. You emphasize the specific problem with current technology, but here we really want to emphasize that there is someone who needs this technology or who'd greatly benefit from it being on the market, rather than something that would simply be nice to have. Really emphasizing that pain point. Need to have is always going to be more competitive and more compelling than nice to have. Once you've identified your customer need, it's important to identify your target customer. And you want to provide a description of exactly who this is. Do you have one? Are there multiple? And is the person using your product the same person who pays for it? This can be particularly relevant for companies developing new pharmaceutical compounds or medical devices, where the end user or patient may not necessarily be the one who's paying you for the service. And finally, within all of this, we want to address our product and service and how your product fits in with the problems above. How does it fit in with the market? How would it address barriers to entry? What are the customer needs, and why do they align well with my product? Why will my target customer be likely to use this product? So in addressing key points, first, describing the market. Market reports are a great way to find information about what particular area your product fits within. These can be found online or through local libraries. They can also be bought. I will caution that they are quite expensive if you try to pay for a market report. However, there are typically free versions online that can at least get you started. And if you do have access to a local library, they may have access to market reports that you can use to fill out this section. Here, you want to detail things like total addressable market, serviceable addressable market, and serviceable attainable market. If you've worked with any support following a phase 1 application through the NIH or NSF, either through the TABA program, NIH I-Core program. You may have already received some market research for your product. This is a great section or great content to use for this section. You also want to highlight recent innovations in the field that have succeeded or failed. This is touching a bit on competition, but it's important to note who the key players are in your industry and what they've been doing well and how much of the market they have access to. And a great way to address market size is also to point to letters of support from investors or industry experts that you may know. If you have someone who's interested in supporting your technology, ask them for a letter of support to go along with your application and indicate that they think this is really likely to succeed. They can highlight their prior expertise in innovating or perhaps leading companies in this area and allude to their confidence in your technology as to why they're confident you'll succeed as well. For the customer needs, this is also a great point to support with letters attached to your application. Getting a letter from a potential end user or a potential payer is a great way to both instill confidence in viewers that, one, you understand your customer and have already engaged them, and two, that there's a need and someone interested in purchasing your product should you be successful and get it to market. For your target customer, we highly recommend that you be specific. This is particularly relevant for technologies that could address a wide range of problems. However, once you finish phase 2, it's not likely that your product will be able to reach everyone. Even if you have a plan to reach everyone at the end, start somewhere. What's feasible? What is your beachhead market and who is your first target customer? And describe your plans to reach them specifically. Finally, for your product and service, we want to describe how the users and payers will engage with your innovation. We want to estimate the benefit of solving their problem quantitatively, not qualitatively. What sort of cost savings would this convey to a customer? Would this save money for a hospital system in administering a certain service? Does this decrease the number of steps and overall provider burden that is needed to reach a diagnosis? Detail this in as best you are able, and then allude to the potential impact for the general public. A few examples of what these sections might look like. First is a market description. Shown on the right is a sample table showing a market projection. You can probably find lots of graphs like this for your target indication by Googling and looking for a market report in this area. Graphs like this are very common, where some of the details in the report are typically behind a paywall. But something like this might be easy to find. Here you can find information about our sample disease here, and we're providing a description of the global systemic antibiotic market. Here we're noting the current value of the market, what it's projected to reach in the future, the fragmentation of the market and which key companies might be currently acting there, and what the leading segment is, particularly for antibiotics, what is the leading class, and are we working in that class or a different one? Why is this market growing, in particular this segment, and what other advantages or what other factors might be impacting this market in the future? This is an example of customer pain points and how you can delineate why specifically someone would need a product such as yours. This is a graphic from the FDA showing a particular need for new diagnostics and screening tests for a certain form of genetic disorder. You may accompany a graphic such as this with a description much as like what's shown on the left, where we extol the challenges directly affiliated with diagnosing or screening disease X. It may be costly, may be done many times, may be inaccurate, require or incur a high burden on the patients or the parents or the providers. This is how you, using these factors can help describe the pain point. And then ideally, all the factors highlighted here would be one that your technology addresses. You can kind of set yourself up to succeed by describing pain points that your technology is uniquely poised to alleviate. Next, we want to talk a bit about the value proposition and business plan. And what is a value proposition? Well, a value proposition is a clear statement that should explain how your product solves the customer's problem or improves their situation. It should deliver specific benefits and tell your customer why they should buy from you and not from the competition. Here, we're highlighting specific factors, that is relevancy, a quantified value, and unique differentiation. Why is my product relevant to this customer? How much is it going to save them? And why is it better than someone else's? You can do this a Mad Lib style with a sample sentence shown at the bottom here. Unlike my competing company, our product helps this market segment who wants to do X by lowering Y and increasing Z. You can use an example of this using Amazon. And they're a super aggregator of vendors and customers, giving people a compelling one-stop online shopping experience. Who they are, they're Amazon. Why are they better? Or what do they do? They're a super aggregator. They combine vendors and customers. And how do they help? They give people easy access to products, information, and friction-free delivery. This is a condensed value statement that's easy for reviewers to gravitate to and contains all the information above. In addition to a written form of a value proposition, you can also convey this graphically. Moving back to our example of disease X, we can maybe graphically describe what the steps are for the current standard of care. For this fictional example, disease X requires initial patient screening, lab tests, a specialist visit, medical imaging, additional visits before treatment finally starts. All of these steps in the middle are very costly. They take a long time, 3 to 4 months. They're very burdensome to the patients, hard to access, requiring medical imaging and specialists, might require multiple locations, and create challenges for providers where they can't track participants along this trajectory. Then enters your product. This may reduce the overall time to care by several months by alleviating several of these steps and combining them into one, reducing costs, less steps, faster time to treatment, and less burden on providers. Graphics like this can very directly convey the benefit of your technology and where it interfaces in the current standard of care, and again, how users will engage with it. Moving on from the value statement is the business plan. This should flow organically from your value statement. In fact, the business plan should be a space where you reiterate your value proposition and specify your target customers and how you plan to engage them. This is a space where you should provide an overview of your company's approach to sustaining commercial success, and also a space for you to describe your IP, that is current status and strategy, your approach to marketing and sales, and projected revenue estimates or a finance plan. Now, if you're new to the SBIR STTR process, or very early in your early in the idea stage or a current proof of concept stage for your company, these may not be factors that you've thought deeply about before. But moving into phase 2 of either an NIH or NSF SBIR application, these are details you're going to need to provide. And if you're early, it's a great time to start. And a resource you can use to do so is the business model canvas. This is a free worksheet that you can also find online, which asks you to work through these factors bit by bit and asks you prompts to help you answer them and think about what you might need to access. Who are the key partners that I need to engage to move my product to market? What key activities do I and we as a company need to engage in? What resources do we have to have access to? Again, what is our value proposition? What advantage do we provide to the customers? What sort of customer relationships do we want to form? Who are our customer segments and how are we going to reach them through channels? And finally, how much is our product going to cost? And what might our revenue streams look like? When completed, your business model canvas might look something like this. This is an example for a pandemic and season of flu intervention, where they identified their key partners as gene synthesis companies and CMOs, key activities such as R&D and manufacturing, IP and trade secret and manufacturing facilities as resources they'll need access to, as well as the desire to form long-term contracts with government and vaccine manufacturers and specific customer segments they'd like to engage with CDC, DARPA, foreign governments, and vaccine manufacturers. The overall point here is that the business model canvas can be a really useful tool for you to get started. in breaking down these different, or in filling in these different segments, which you can then use to complete your commercialization plan. Another thing I want to highlight in the business plan is that this should reflect long-term goals. This is something I mentioned early on in the presentation, but want to reiterate here. The business plan should extend beyond your phase 1 or phase 2 proposal. And when thinking about your long-term goals, understand that it's important to understand that some businesses may proceed all the way through to manufacturing and direct sales. If you're making a new medical device, perhaps you plan to take it all the way to market and directly sell to consumers. But that's not always the case. Other companies may elect to specify an exit strategy or alternative that does not include direct sales to customers, and that's fine. These can be things like licensing, buyout, or partnerships to move your product onto market. The important thing to note here about these different long-term strategies is that there is no right or wrong option to choose when depicting one on your commercialization plan. The important factor to note is that you provide resources and information to indicate you have thought deeply about this particular strategy and have access to the resources needed to achieve it. Do you plan to manufacture and sell your product directly? Okay, what do you need to do to get there? What sort of partnerships do you need to form? Are there, do you have resources or access or the ability to actually identify and engage with these customers? Do you plan to license your technology? Who might license it from you? Have you started talking to anyone? Do you have potential companies interested? Or if you want to form a partnership, who might those partners be? And what might that partnership be structured like? And if you don't have a complete plan at the time of application, or you think your plan might change later on, that's okay. Remember, this is a proposal and things do change during the execution of the project. The important part, again, is to indicate that you have a plan and have the resources to follow it through. Another thing to mention here is that if your business has multiple products in development, it's important to specify the long-term goal for the one developed in your proposal. If you have multiple different chemical entities, for example, under development for different indications, if they're all going to proceed through the same product development pipeline, you can leverage successes with prior compounds to bolster this potential success for the new one developed here. But if it's different, indicate how it's different and what you plan to do with this one specifically. Next, I'm going to touch briefly on intellectual property protection. This section is relevant to both the NIH and NSF and can often be a key review factor, as reviewers will want to know that you have the ability to protect your innovation within the scope of the project and beyond. So within the IP section, it's important to provide a list of any patents or other sorts of IP that you currently have or that have applied for, what they cover, and their status. Here you can describe the results of any freedom to operate searches that have been performed in partnership with an IP attorney or other group, and state your plans for filing additional IP during the course of the project or beyond. A few tips. It's important. Here's a great space to list any issued or pending patents, and again, provide a description of their coverage. If you're working with a university partner and you're licensing your technology from them, describe what that arrangement looks like, and if possible, include a letter from your university indicating that you have the ability to work with that technology. And if you have a patent attorney or other form of IP advisor, provide their name and experience. This is also a great factor to support with letters of support as well. Next, I'm going to talk briefly about your finance and revenue model. This, again, is very forward thinking. In the finance plan, we want to describe funding required to reach milestones and each level of your product development plan and how these funds would be accessed. Describe any current commitments, that is, other ongoing grant support or investor support that are put into this project or others. Additionally, you can also describe your revenue model or revenue streams. This is an important factor for the National Science Foundation, as they do strongly emphasize commercialization and commercial potential in their applications, but it's not always required for the NIH. For the revenue model, you can consider providing a description of projected revenue. Generally about 5 years out is sufficient. If you have a pro forma, you can include this along with income statements, cash flow, and balance sheets. And if you have a revenue model, you want to list assumptions in developing that model and how you validated it. As I mentioned, the important part here is that we're forward thinking with our finance and revenue model. And why is that the case? Well, in some applications, participants or applicants may specify grant support and solely grant support as the means by which they plan to move their product and support their product development all the way through to commercialization. And remember, this is not the goal of the SBIR and STTR program. The goal of SBIR and STTR program through phase 1 and phase 2 is to position you for commercialization by filling that initial valley of death and positioning you to be attractive to other sorts of investors and partners that will help you move yourself, advance your company on to commercialization, commercial success. So when thinking about your finance and revenue model, you want to focus on incorporating your grant application into an overall financing strategy that includes other support, that is strategic investments or strategic partnerships. In doing this, it's great. This is a great area to support with figures and timelines. A very basic timeline may look something like this, where we specify the current stage of our technology, which might be in preclinical development, and planning to move forward to phase 1 clinical testing. This is what we plan to support with grant funding. Beyond that, we plan to attract strategic venture capital funding before partnering with someone to support our technology through phase 2 all the way to market. You can also include a slightly more advanced version of a finance or revenue model that may look something like this. This graphic shows specific steps through pre-IND, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 clinical trials, provides a timeline for when all these activities would be performed between the years of 2019 and 2025, and breaks down the specific activities below, both by cost and time. And then all the way at the bottom, they indicate their target funding sources. That is, they plan to support their pre-IND studies through phase 2 SBIR, eventually raise a Series A that'll take them through phase 1, and Series B and a partnership to take them through phase 2 to phase 3. The importance of the finance and revenue model figures here is to illustrate to reviewers that you've thought about this timeline, again, beyond just this grant, and what sort of resources, particularly funding, you'll need to access in order to take your product all the way through to the end of its product development timeline, development trajectory. Speaking of which, we next want to talk a little bit about the product development timeline and milestones. So recall that your product development path starts typically with a concept, moves through basic technology, feasibility, refinement, demonstration, and a final product before launch. And SBIR and STTR support really fits within these middle 3 sections, where you're helping to support feasibility, refinement of your technology, and before demonstrating ahead of product launch. With that in mind, we want to specify where your technology is along this development pipeline and how SBIR support fits into it overall. So, as I mentioned, a few key points. We're going to describe the current state of your technology and also milestones you've completed to date. Describe your future milestones and efforts and resources needed to reach them. These can include completion of certain preclinical clinical studies, manufacturing objectives, prototype development, regulatory filings, etc. Additionally, you can indicate points by which at which you intend to partner or begin commercializing your product and generating revenue. And also, this is a great place to describe foreseen challenges in reaching your market. These can be issues such as penetrance, regulatory hurdles, and also an opportunity for you to describe mitigation strategies. So as you can tell from the description of what we want to include in the product development section, this overlaps a lot with our finance plan, where you can break them out into separate graphs if you so choose. Here's a more detailed product development timeline that shows progression from 2018 to 2024 through phase 1 to phase 2 SBIR STTR support, and the specific activities that will be supported under each of those down below. They've also indicated their key milestones up above, where they're completing or identifying their early candidate, finally submitting an IND to the FDA, and finally submitting their NDA several years down the line. Again, there's a lot of overlap in how you can frame or position these particular sections with your finance plan. And in fact, you can combine them together. That's a really nice way to indicate that each one of these steps will be or is planned to be supported by either grant support or external investors. As I mentioned, this is also a great place to highlight key risks and mitigation strategies that you can employ to move or basically circumvent these risks as you move your product forward. This is a table showing regulatory, clinical, competition, marketing, scientific risks, etc., and denotes the main question or issue related to each and what the odds of each of these are of imposing a barrier to successful commercialization. In addition to this, we also specify mitigation strategies. So even for high or strong barriers moving a technology forward, you can provide mitigation strategies that alleviate that risk. So for example, a particular clinical risk for this applicant's technology was, will our compounds be efficacious when we translate them to humans? They do mark this risk as high, but they note in their mitigation strategy that they plan to exit the market for each compound they develop at phase 1 or phase 2A and pass this risk on to the partner or buyer, and that their human iPSC in vitro testing may lower the risk of efficacy pitfalls in phase 2. You can use a chart similar to this with your own technology to indicate to reviewers that you've thought about the different risks in moving your product forward, understand what specifically is in question related to that area, and how you plan to mitigate it. So a few tips for your product development timeline and milestones. First, be specific. Include to the best you can target dates, regulatory submissions, FDA meetings, and know that your projected time to market should be reasonable. If you're proposing to develop a new drug within 2 years, reviewers will probably doubt your ability to do so, unless you have extensive data and history doing so in the past. So be reasonable with your timeline. Here's also a great place to denote prior or completed milestones. This can instill confidence in reviewers if you do have an aggressive timeline, that you have completed them in the past and can do so on in future studies. As I mentioned, you can also match your timeline to your finance plan. You can combine these in a single graphical table, like some of the examples we saw previously, and denote how those key development steps will be funded by this specific SBIR or STTR grant or by external investors. Additionally, it's important to think carefully about your risks. If there is a large risk ahead, you should mention it, even if you think it may dissuade someone from or essentially encourage someone to lose confidence in moving your product forward. This application is going to be reviewed by experts in your field and those who do understand the industry well. If you don't list it, the reviewers likely will catch it. And if you haven't listed it, they may assume that you haven't thought ahead, aren't aware of it, and score you negatively. And when saying that, it's important to note that each risk can be paired with a solution. Even if you do have a large risk, you can circumvent it with appropriate planning. If you don't have an immediate resource to cite that is immediately available to the company now, indicate that you can get one at the appropriate time and who you might be able to pull on in your network to do so. You don't have to have all the answers right now, but it is important to indicate that you understand the risk and have a plan to at least go about circumventing it. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about competition before we wrap up for some Q&A. So in your competition section, which can be listed and kind of interwoven throughout your commercialization plan, you want to describe competing technologies and companies. This includes the current standard of care, up-and-coming innovators, and it's a space for you to know the advantages and disadvantages of your technology. Indicate, again, why other companies have or have not succeeded in this space and why your technology is superior. You can do this in one of several ways, either by writing it out long form or by combining this information into a competitive matrix. In a written version, it may look something like this. This is an example from another NIA application from Corticometrics, where they denoted 3 companies that they identified as key competitors, all of which had received FDA clearance for their neuromorphometry reporting devices. Here they describe their current regulatory status, what they do well and what they don't do well, and then they go on beyond this page limit to describe what their technology solves specifically. You can also represent this information as a table. This is another example from the SBIR application through NIAID, where they denote their specific competitors, what their products are, and their key advantage over those products. That is increased sensitivity and specificity, lower sample volume, and electronic readouts. You can also include tables such as this one, where they denote other product competitors, the test type, their regulatory status, and if not cleared, where they currently are in the development timeline. And then go on to expand on how your technology, or their technology in this case, is better than what is currently on the market and in development. So a few key tips for addressing these points with respect to your competition. The first is that there's always competition. Even if you believe you're going to be first to market in a new area, understand that the current standard of care is a competitor. And stating that you have no competition in the space may be hard to swallow for reviewers. Do your market research, understand who else is working in your space. You can access this through market reports, speaking directly with industry experts, going to conferences in your space to understand who else is innovating here. You can access some customer research through the NSF ICORS program. This is available to SBIR and STTR applicants prior to winning a phase 1 award, and is something anyone can engage with. And it's a great way to get experience talking directly to customers and understanding who else they're working, or who else they're interested in, and who else is innovating in your space. You can also review companies working in your technology area and those funded by your target agency, particularly if you're working with medical devices or new pharmaceuticals, by reviewing what's currently underway on clinicaltrials.gov. You can also look at currently funded companies through NIH Reporter and who's been funded by the NSF using the NSF portfolio. And before we wrap up here, I did want to leave you with a few other helpful resources that you can use when compiling your commercialization plan. The first is the NSF's Commercialization Assistance Program, or CAP. This is available to phase 1 awardees only, but is a service that you can access where the NSF will pair you with a vendor to help you write your commercialization plan and perform market research. Similarly, the NIH ICOR program, which is available to phase 1 awardees only, offers similar services, including market research and customer interviews. You can also make use of the Technical and Business Assistance, or TEBA. This is available through the NIH or NSF, as well as other agencies, and can be found on SBIR.gov or at the host agency's website. This is extra funding available to you to pay for your own market research or customer discovery, and can be added on top of a phase 1 or phase 2 award. Additionally, there are sample applications available through the NIH. These include phase 1 applications, phase 2, and fast track applications, with phase 2 and fast tracks having standalone commercialization plans, and phase 1's showing you having good examples of how you can fold in commercialization potential within a 6-page research strategy. Additionally, there are other resources available through the NIH Seed Office, as well as SBIR.gov, which can help pair you with local resources, as well as those available federally through their website. With that, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today.